There are walls that do more than separate the outside world from sacred silence. There are walls that hold secrets, walls that have absorbed screams that no one heard, tears that dried on cold stone. Today we are going to Puebla, the city of angels, but we will descend into hell. The hell hidden behind the sanctified walls of the convent of San Miguel. We're going to talk about faith, about power, and about impossible pregnancies that occurred in a place where flesh should be dead. This is the story of the nuns who, to save God, made a pact with the devil and hid the proof of their sin in the very bowels of the convent. I am Padre Del Valle, and this is Realidad Mexico. Before you cross this threshold, I need you to listen to me. What you are about to hear will make you uncomfortable. It will hurt you. It will enrage you. Because it exposes the hypocrisy that dresses itself in robes of holiness, and the cowardice of a system that would rather bury the truth than face scandal. If you are one of those who are not afraid to look darkness in the eye, if you believe that the memory of the victims matters more than the reputation of institutions, then subscribe, join us, because here we don't whisper. Here, we shout the truths that others want to silence. Now get ready. The story I'm about to tell you began with a hammer and the hollow sound of a wall that shouldn't have been there. The man with the hammer was called Santiago Rojas. He was an architect, young, full of that almost religious passion for history. For him, old buildings weren't just stones and mortar. They were books, books that told the story of those who lived in them. In 2019, he was given the project of his life, the restoration of the north wing of the old convent of San Miguel, a 17th century building closed to the public since the reform laws. Abandoned, silent, a sleeping giant in the heart of Puebla. Santiago was ecstatic. He spent his days walking through the empty corridors. The echo of his footsteps was the only sound. He felt the cold of the confessionals. He imagined the prayers in the chapel stripped of its saints. The smell of old wax and centuries of dust was his perfume. His team began the work, drawing up plans, structural analysis, everything normal, everything according to the books, until they reached the former dormitory of the novices. A long, narrow room with small cells on either side. There was something strange about the back wall. The original plan of the convent, a yellowed parchment from 1680, showed a window there, a window overlooking the inner garden. But the wall was solid, smooth. There was no trace of a window, as if it had never existed. Santiago ran his hand along the wall. It was colder than the rest, an unnatural cold. "There's something here," he said to his foreman, an older man named Ramiro. Ramiro tapped the wall with his knuckles. He smiled. "False wall, architect. They did it to reinforce the structure during an earthquake, probably." But Santiago wasn't convinced. The masonry was different, more rough. It lacked the perfection of the master builders of the viceroyalty. It looked like it had been done in a hurry, with fear. He asked Ramiro to bring a sledgehammer. "Be careful," he said. "Just a small hole. I want to see what's behind it." Ramiro shrugged. The first blow echoed throughout the convent, like a gunshot. The second knocked out a piece of plaster. The third was different. The mallet went through the wall with frightening ease. A dull sound, hollow. A waft of stale air came out of the hole, an indescribable smell, sweet and putrid at the same time. The smell of flesh rotting away. Santiago approached. His heart was pounding in his ears. He shone the flashlight on his cell phone through the hole. The flickering light swept through the darkness. And then he saw it. The horror. Behind the false wall, there was no structural reinforcement. There was a small cavity, a niche, no bigger than a closet. And inside, on the dusty floor, there was something. At first, he didn't understand what it was. It looked like a collection of small, whitish objects. Ramiro leaned over to look. He let out a low curse. Holy God. Are those bones? Santiago didn't answer. He asked them to open the hole wider. Carefully. Chisel and hammer. As the opening grew, the scale of the horror became clear. They weren't animal bones. They were human. Too small, too fragile. Skulls the size of oranges. Ribs as thin as knitting needles. They were the skeletons of babies. Newborns. Not one. Not two. There were dozens. Piled up without ceremony. Mixed with scraps of linen. Small makeshift shrouds. The crew of workers fell silent. A heavy silence, broken only by the sound of restrained breathing. No one dared to speak. The air had become thick, unbreathable. Santiago felt his legs give way. He leaned against the opposite wall. The cold of the stone dug into his back. But the cold he felt inside was much worse. A coldness that started in the pit of his stomach and rose up to his throat. His hands were shaking. He dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, illuminating the pale faces of the workers. Faces of disbelief, of fear, of disgust. Santiago closed his eye. The image of the small skulls was burned into his eyelids. Who? Why? How could this happen in a house of God? The smell. That sweet, terrible smell. Now he understood. It was the smell of a secret that had been rotting for 300 years. He opened his eyes. His architect's mind, his logic, his reason, everything had been shattered. This was no longer a restoration project. It was a crime scene, a silent massacre. "Don't touch anything," he said in a voice he didn't recognize as his own. "Call the authorities." But what authorities do you call when the ghosts are 3 centuries old? The investigation that followed was a bureaucratic nightmare. But amid the chaos, Santiago found a key. Hidden in the same niche, under the pile of bones, a small cedar box. Inside, a diary. A leather-bound book, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting was elegant, but shaky. The writing of a woman. A nun. Diary of Sister Ana de la Cruz. Year of our Lord, 1721. That night, in the solitude of his hotel, Santiago began to read. And the truth, more terrible than anything he could have imagined, began to flow from those yellowed pages. Sister Ana was not an accomplice. She was a witness, a chronicler of horror. It all began, she wrote, with the arrival of the new confessor. Father Agustin de la Vega, a charismatic man. His voice in the pulpit was like music. His eyes, Sister Ana said, promised heaven while dragging you to hell. Father Agustin soon exercised absolute power over the nuns, especially over the youngest ones, the novices, girls from noble families, given to the convent at the age of 15 or 16. Alone, scared. He used the secrecy of confession as a weapon. He knew their fears, their doubts, their little sins. He manipulated them. He isolated them. He convinced them that obedience to him was obedience to God. He spoke to us of tests of faith, wrote Sister Ana, of sacrifices that the Lord demanded in secret, of acts of carnal submission to purify the soul. The abuse was systematic, silent, protected by the walls of the convent and the veil of obedience. Then the unthinkable happened. Sister Clara, a 17-year-old novice, began to show signs: morning sickness, a bulging belly. The Mother Superior, a harsh woman named Sister Teresa, locked her in the infirmary. Panic gripped the convent. A pregnancy in a cloister was a scandal that could destroy everything. But Father Agustin did not flinch. On the contrary, he gathered the nuns together, and he declared that what Sister Clara had done was not a sin. It was a miracle. "The Holy Spirit has descended upon this house," he proclaimed, "as he did with the Virgin Mary. This child is chosen." It was blasphemy, madness. But the nuns, terrified and indoctrinated, did not dare to contradict him. The baby was stillborn, a boy. Sister Teresa and her trusted nuns buried him in secret in the garden. But the horror did not end there. Soon, other novices showed the same signs. Miraculous pregnancies. Some reached full term, others did not. The babies who were born alive died within a few days. Lack of care, disease, or something worse. Sister Anna does not write it, but she hints at it. The children's cries were silenced too soon. She wrote in smudged ink, as if she had cried on the page. Mother Teresa, desperate to hide the scandal, made a monstrous decision. No more burials in the garden. Too risky. She ordered a false wall to be built in the dormitory, and to use the hollow space as a secret ossuary. A sacred limbo, she called it. Here will rest the little angels that God sent us and so quickly claimed for himself. The nuns themselves built the wall, at night, in silence. Every time a baby died, Sister Teresa, with the help of 2 loyal nuns, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and she placed it in the darkness, behind the wall. A macabre offering to silence a scandal. Sister Anna saw everything. She wrote everything down. "This is not the work of God," she concludes in her last entry. "This is the work of a demon dressed as a priest, and of women who fear the judgment of men more than they fear God's judgment. May the Lord have mercy on our souls. For we have turned a house of prayer into a tomb." Santiago closed the diary. His hands hurt from clutching it so tightly. The air in the room was thick. He could hear the muffled cries. He could feel the fear of those girls, and the cold of the niche where their children ended up. The truth had not set him free. It had chained him to that story forever. With Sister Anna's diary and the preliminary forensic report in his hands, Santiago felt he had an unassailable case. The truth was so clear, so brutal, that no one could ignore it. How wrong he was. His first meeting was with the regional director of the INAH, the National Institute of Anthropology and History, Mr. Mendez, a man in a gray suit with a perpetually bored expression. His office was full of old maps and pre-Hispanic artifacts. For him, history was something clean, something to be put in display cases. Santiago handed him the report and a transcript of the key parts of the diary. He spoke with the passion of a convert. He spoke of murder, of cover-ups, of justice for those nameless victims. Mendez listened without looking at him. His eyes were fixed on a monitor where a spreadsheet was flashing. When Santiago finished, Mendez sighed. A sigh of annoyance. "Mr. Rojas," he said without looking up from the screen, "I understand your enthusiasm, but we must be precise." He clicked the mouse. "What you found is not a crime scene. It is an atypical funerary archaeological context." Santiago couldn't believe what he was hearing. Archaeological. Their babies? They were murdered, or at least left to die, and hidden in a wall. Mendez finally looked at him, with irritation. We have no evidence of murder. We have skeletal remains from a specific historical period. That nun's diary is interesting, a primary source, but it's not legal evidence. It's the subjective testimony of a person from 300 years ago. He leaned back in his chair, which protested with a squeak. Our mandate, architect, is to preserve heritage. We're not the public prosecutor's office. We're going to catalog the remains, date them, and secure the site. Secure the site? What does that mean? Asked Santiago, feeling a knot of ice in his stomach. It means that the area is closed off, sealed, for future investigation, which could happen in 5, 10, or 50 years. He took a stack of papers from his desk. Now, I need you to fill out these forms. The 7C for chance finds, and 11B for the report on sensitive organic materials. Be detailed, please. The system wasn't looking for justice. It was looking to organize the horror into folders. Classify it, seal it, file it away until it was forgotten. Santiago left that office feeling like the world had gone mad. The air on the street burned his lungs. He looked at the INAH building. It looked like a fortress designed not to protect history, but to bury it again. Frustrated, he decided to go higher, to the source of it all, the church. Through a contact, he secured an audience with the auxiliary bishop of Puebla, Monsignor Beltran, an elderly man with gentle gestures and shrewd eyes. He received him in a room in the archbishop's palace, a quiet place, filled with sacred art and polished mahogany furniture. It smelled of incense and ancient power. Santiago, this time, was more cautious. He presented the facts soberly. He showed him the diary. He spoke of the church's need to acknowledge this wound, to ask for forgiveness, to give those children a dignified burial. Monsignor Beltran listened with infinite patience. He pressed his fingertips together, forming an arch. "My son," he said in a velvety voice, "what you tell me is an immense tragedy, a painful echo of a dark past." He paused, as if choosing each word with the care of a surgeon. But you must understand the context. The 18th century was a time of brutality and superstition. Those poor women, Mother Teresa, the other nuns, they acted out of fear of scandal, fear of the destruction of their community. Their sin was silence, not evil. Monsignor, they hid dozens of dead babies in a wall. That transcends fear. The bishop smiled, a sad, paternalistic smile. And what good are we doing now, 35 years later, digging up this pain, tainting the memory of a religious order that has done so much good, feeding the appetite of the enemies of the church? He stood up and walked toward a large ivory crucifix hanging on the wall. The church believes in forgiveness and in prudence. These children are with God. Their souls do not need our clumsy intervention. What they need now is peace, silence, prayer. He turned to Santiago. His voice, once soft, now had a steely edge. "I ask you, as a father, to leave this in God's hands and in ours. We will take care of it, in our own way, in our own time. Give me that diary. It is a document of the church. It belongs here." Santiago froze. He wasn't offering help. He was asking for the weapon, the only proof, to be kept in a secret file, so that silence would reign once more. He felt the weight of centuries of power falling upon him. He felt small, insignificant. He refused to hand over the diary. The audience ended abruptly. As he left the Archbishop's palace, the sun seemed like a mockery. The bureaucrat's indifference was one thing. But complicity dressed up as pity was something much darker. Santiago made one last attempt. The official, the Attorney General's office. The building was modern, glass and steel, a promise of transparency that turned out to be an illusion. A young, overworked public prosecutor reviewed his file. He read the forensic report. He leafed through the transcript of the diary. He looked up and scratched his head. "Mr. Rojas, your story is incredible, worthy of a movie." "It's real," said Santiago. "I don't doubt it. But legally, there's nothing we can do." "What do you mean, there's nothing to be done?" The agent sighed, the same sigh as the director of the INAH. The universal sound of bureaucracy. "Look, the crime of murder, if there was one, was committed 280 years ago. The crime of concealment, too. There are no living persons responsible to prosecute. There is no case. What about the bodies? What about the dignity of those victims? That's a matter for historians, or for the INAH, or for the church, not for the criminal justice system. We can't open an investigation into history. My job is to prosecute crimes today, not those committed in colonial times." He handed the papers back to Santiago. "I recommend you write a book, sir. It's a great topic. But as far as we're concerned, there's nothing to proceed with." Case closed. Case closed. Before it had even been opened. Santiago sat in the waiting room of the prosecutor's office. The noise of the phones, of people talking, everything seemed distant to him. He held the papers in his hand, the evidence of horror. And for the system, that's all they were. Papers, an inconvenient file, a historical anecdote. Not a cry for justice that had taken 3 centuries to be heard. Just an administrative problem that was best filed away. Today, the north wing of the Convent of San Miguel remains closed. The hole in the wall has been sealed, this time by order of the INAH, with modern cement, a gray scar on the ancient stone, a tomb sealed for the second time. Santiago Rojas never finished the restoration. He resigned from the project. He left his job at the prestigious architectural firm. Some say he became obsessed, that he lost his mind. But he knows the truth. He didn't lose his mind. He lost his innocence. He lost his faith that the truth always comes out. And that systems are there to protect the innocent. Sometimes, at night, he returns to the street where the convent stands. He stands there looking at the outer wall, imagining the small cavity on the other side, the dust, the darkness, and the tiny bones. He is their only remaining guardian, the only one who heard their cries through the centuries. And the weight of that silence is the penance he will carry for the rest of his life. I am Padre del Valle, and I'll see you in the next Realidad, Mexico.